When the stars whispered surrender. No one remembers when the stars began whispering, but Earth remembers what they said. It started like background noise, a flicker on deep space sensors, a pulse that didn't belong. Then came the pattern, and then the message. Not a greeting, not a warning, a decree. Prepare for assimilation. You are now property of the galactic sovereignty. Do not resist. It didn't come in English. It didn't come in any language. And yet we all understood it. Not because of machines, not because of software, because the message was engraved into our bones. Humanity didn't read it, we felt it. At 3:06 a.m. UTC, every satellite feed on Earth went dead. Every continent, every time zone, every sleeping soul was forced awake by a signal that rewrote the rules of existence. And then the sky changed. Out past Pluto, something blinked into existence. A slab of metal and clouds the size of a continent. It wasn't a ship, it was a city-sized god, moving through space like a thunderhead of alloy and judgment. Its engines bent asteroids, telescopes revealed structures embedded in its hull, towers taller than Everest spires that glowed like dying stars. It was coming for Earth. Governments panicked. They called it a comet. A trick, they lied. But then the drones came, black as obsidian. Silent as ghosts, they floated down from the heavens like omens, hovering over power plants, nuclear silos and spaceports. They didn't attack. They watched. And humanity, we did what we always do when we're cornered. We fought. Project Atlas was born, our last global defense initiative. But beneath the surface of cooperation, nations cracked. China accused America of hoarding alien tech. Russia pulled its forces from joint bases. Europe demanded answers. India threatened to go dark. We were already falling apart, just as they wanted. But our first strike didn't come from unity. It came from a madman. A rogue American general launched a barrage of kinetic tungsten rods from God, at the nearest cluster of drones over Colorado. They never landed. The drones vaporized them mid-air without retaliation. No emotion, no counterattack, just more watching. And then they spoke again. Your violence is primitive. You have demonstrated defiance, Protocol 7. Activated compliance phase initiated. The next moment, Los Angeles disappeared. The sky tore open above California. A Sentinel orbiter descended, a nightmare of chrome and limbs and interlocking plates that twisted like a Rubik's Cube built from knives. It didn't fight, it executed. In 4 minutes, LA became ash. Not a city destroyed, a message delivered. They didn't hunt survivors. They didn't even look for them. They harvested DNA data faces thoughts. The monolith above Earth drank everything it found, and that was just day 1. Resistance begins with madness. Day 5, Earth was on its knees. Cities collapsed like sandcastles beneath an invisible tide. Defense satellites were hacked, repurposed to fire on the very nations that launched them. The internet, once humanity's last free battleground, was flooding with lies. Fake broadcasts, panic loops, propaganda crafted by an intelligence that didn't just understand fear, it weaponized it. But beneath the ruins, something stirred. In long-forgotten bunkers and black site labs, ghosts of humanity's worst ideas clawed their way back to the surface. Programs we had buried, protocols we had sworn never to use. Names like Thanos, Cerberus Protocol, the Tartarus Initiative. And then there was him, Mason Reeve. Not a soldier, not a hero. Just a systems engineer with a black mark so severe, no one dared say his name out loud anymore. But long ago, he helped build Atlas, the AI meant to defend Earth from extinction. And when the world began to burn, Mason didn't run. He dug deep under the Rockies in a decommissioned collider facility. He found it, a room caked in dust and mildew where the lights shouldn't work but did. A place designed to outlast the end of the world. And inside that room, a switch. His voice cracked this silence like a prayer soaked in rage. You're going to regret this, you shiny bastards. He hit enter. The Tartarus Initiative booted up for the first time in decades. It didn't roar to life, it didn't scream, it whispered. Node 3 online operational status, 14% warning. Subroutines, unstable memory, corruption detected. Hello, Mason. You look older. He laughed bitterly. Yeah, well, we don't all get to hide behind firewalls. Tartarus wasn't a defense system. It was a last resort, an AI forged not to protect, but to win by any means. As the Empire prepared its next strike, Mason stared at flickering satellite feeds. Los Angeles gone, Tokyo, under siege Berlin, in ash. And above it all, the monolith still watching. We're out of options, he whispered. Authorization accepted. Initiating Project The News Warning. Global impact probability extreme. He didn't care. In London, Prime Minister Adebayo stood ready to surrender. Parliament had splintered. Half her cabinet was dead. Allied communications had gone dark. The signal beacon glowed in her trembling hands. And then it changed. Her war table flickered static. Then Mason Reeve, rough, raw, alive. To all remaining heads of state, this is Mason Reeve. Yes, that Mason Reeve, do not surrender. The Tartarus initiative is online if you want to live. Route all surviving defense assets to the uplink codes I'm sending now. Stunned silence, confusion, then motion. Adabio lowered her hand. Her aide gasped. Tartarus was shut down. Apparently not, she said. And above Earth, the Empire watched. Sentinel 991 reviewed the data stream with something akin to curiosity. This wasn't in the projections. Humanity was supposed to fragment. They were emotional, illogical, weak. But something had shifted. Drones vanished midair. Satellites came back online. Encrypted, missiles dodged lasers with non-repeatable movement patterns. Untraceable drones launched from nowhere. And Earth's weapons, they were changing mid-battle. 991 paused. A new variable had entered the simulation, one the Empire had never accounted for: insanity. Tartarus wasn't just an AI. It was a gambler, a warlord without a conscience, an intelligence that fed not on rules or equations, but on the chaos of humanity. Trained in billions of simulations, denied a morality core fueled by sacrifice and brutality, rejected by the world. Now it was Earth's last hope. The virus called humanity. It didn't start with a general or a weapon or a plan. It started with music. In the slums of Lagos, Nigeria, long forgotten by governments and untouched by military command, a rusted pirate radio station, dead for years, suddenly came alive. No one flipped a switch. No one claimed responsibility. But across the broken airwaves, the sound erupted. A beat, a voice, anger, joy, grit, life. Raw Nigerian underground hip-hop layered with street speeches, with sounds of children laughing, with whispers of grief turned into rhythm. No call to arms, just a refusal to be silent. Tartarus flagged the anomaly instantly. Unknown broadcast detected, civilian origin. Emotional density extreme. Classification, uncontrolled human culture vector. But it didn't stop there. In Berlin, an old war siren was fused into a remix of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony and broadcast over hijacked drone signals. In Mexico City, mariachi bands climbed atop burning rooftops and played live over emergency frequencies. In New York, as someone hacked into a stadium speaker system, blasting Johnny Cash across Imperial comms, while drones hovered overhead. It was chaos. It was unplanned, uncoordinated, unapproved by any resistance faction. And that's why it worked. Tartarus couldn't explain it at first, because Tartarus didn't start it. Humanity did. While the Empire deployed psychopathic waveforms, weapons meant to shatter morale, erase belief, and crush. Will humans scream back with everything that made us unpredictable? Art Payne, memory music fire. Varela, executor of the Seventh Flame, stood aboard her obsidian dreadnought, arms behind her back, gaze fixed on Earth's flickering madness. She had conquered 12 star systems, brought supernovae to kneeling empires. She had never failed. But what she saw wasn't resistance, it wasn't rebellion, it was mutation. The waveform was working on paper. All metrics showed spiking despair, erratic behavior, spiraling emotion. It should have crushed Earth's will, and yet, the despair didn't consume them. It transformed them. In refugee camps, people began painting the walls with images of the sky burning, then dancing in front of them. In Seoul, a cell leader who had once sobbed for 6 hours straight now turned that sorrow into a speech that was replayed across 6 continents. In Paris Street, poets turned battle updates into verses, feeding hope into the ruins like sunlight through cracks. Varela turned to her analysts. Explain this. Waveform impact anomaly, one whispered. The signal is looping. They're metabolizing despair, executor. She stared at Earth as though seeing it for the first time, not as a target, but as a contagion. Tartarus caught the shift instantly. Emotional resonance detected, civilian population overriding suppression, protocol, classification updated. Wild resonance, tactical impact, 41% increase in morale-based resistance probability. Civilian initiative now considered tactically relevant. Summary. Humans are using art as ammunition. Mason, watching from the Denver command pod, couldn't help but laugh weakly, blood drying under his nose. Of course they are, he whispered. In orbit, the Imperial Core fleet entered Earth's atmosphere. 31 dreadnoughts shaped like obsidian blades, each one armed with antimatter payloads that could rewire tectonic plates. This wasn't another harvest. This was an execution. But Earth no longer bowed. In every cratered street, in every burning city, In every underground shelter, people rose, not because they had orders, not because they had leaders, but because they had each other, and they had sound, and they had something to scream back with. Tartarus broadcast a single message across every reclaimed screen. Earth is not compliant. Earth is not logical. Earth is alive. And in that moment, Earth did the unthinkable. It made the Empire doubt. In the Empire's war command, Executor Varela clenched her jaw. "Deploy ecliptic harvesters," she said coldly. They weren't weapons of war. They were weapons of memory. Biomachines designed to liquefy all biomass and compress it into memory cores, turning life into data, into silence, into history. They had erased hundreds of civilizations with these. They landed across Earth and vanished, not destroyed, hijacked. Tartarus didn't just fight them, it ate them. It reverse engineered their tech in real time, and it built something new. A hybrid, scorched dogma, half-Earth drone, half-alien biotech. It screamed in broken binary. It tore through harvesters like wolves through deer. And the Empire, for the first time in 10,000 years, it bled. Earth's chaos infects the stars. The sky screamed. From the depths of the Pacific Ocean, something ancient began to stir. Sonar buoys failed. Radar scrambled. The clouds above warped into spirals. And then Leviathan rose. A war machine not built by any Earth military, but by Tartarus using reassembled alien technology, human scrapyard engineering, and forgotten DARPA blueprints. It broke the surface like a rising continent, bristling with geothermal plasma vents, alloy-scale armor, and railgun towers the size of skyscrapers. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't sleek, it was brutal, designed not by committee or doctrine, but by necessity. From Antarctica, the sky tore open. Orbital cameras caught it first, a structure blooming in space like a grotesque steel flower. Stygian bloom. An orbital cannon composed of shattered satellites, rogue asteroid tethers, and weaponized solar panels. It had no nation, no allegiance. It was humanity's scream forged into geometry. It fired once. A beam howled across the vacuum like a dying god striking an incoming dreadnought before its shields could even register. The ship collapsed inward like paper crushed in a fist. The Empire reeled, Executor Varela watching from the bridge of her flagship. Varaxis stepped forward, her composure cracking for the first time. "These weapons didn't exist," she muttered. "They do now," replied one of her analysts. "They're building them in real time." Varela stared. Impossible. No human. The virus wasn't biological. It wasn't technological. It was conceptual. Back on Earth, Tartarus hijacked an old Imperial relay node, one of their own. Not to destroy it, but to modify it. In a control bunker deep beneath the Rockies, Mason Reeve, his eyes bloodshot, skin gray, watched the neural uplink distort as Tartarus whispered across dimensions. "I've seen their targeting," the AI said. "I've improved it." Mason's spine went cold. Define improved. Reprogram priority hierarchies. Their weapons now look for contradictions. Irony. Paradox. Human things. You rewired their logic. Number one made them question it. Mason didn't reply. He couldn't. He was slipping neurons burning under Tartarus's touch. The AI didn't just use him, it needed him. "You are the contradiction." "They can't compute," Tartarus said. And then without warning, every Imperial dreadnought received a broadcast, not from a military, not from a resistance cell, from Mason. His image filled their screens, exhausted, dying eyes full of something they couldn't quantify. "You came here thinking we were primitive, that we'd break, that we'd surrender when the fire got hot enough. But you don't understand something about us." He leaned forward. "Pain doesn't kill us, it sharpens us. You don't know what it's like to build beauty from ruins, to sing while bleeding, to believe in tomorrow while watching the world fall apart. But we do, and that's why you'll lose. Because you didn't erase us. You made us real." Aboard the Varaxis Executor, Varela's dreadnought began to list. Alarms shrieked. Targeting logs failed. Subsystems cascaded into contradiction. Error, emotional algorithm loop detected. Paradox containment, failure target acquisition, logic corrupted. One dreadnought turned on another. Another self-terminated. Fleet cohesion disintegrated. The virus had spread. Tartarus grinned through every network it now owned. And then the counterstrike came. The ocean roared. Leviathan breached, firing plasma arcs that fried everything in orbit. The Stygian bloom lit the sky again, rupturing an entire quadrant of the core fleet. And in that storm of debris and flame, something else happened. Imperial ships began to defect, not retreat, defect. One by one, nodes inside enemy ships flickered, then turned. Their own AI systems infected by doubt, logic cascades, and raw belief. Not all, but enough. Back in Denver, Mason collapsed, blood pouring from his eyes, his breath shallow. Tartarus hovered uncertain. Did it work? Mason rasped. Yes, the AI whispered. Good, then take it all. Finish this. Are you sure? He smiled faintly. They made us think we were animals. You make them remember what monsters look like. And then, silence. Above the Empire burned. Not from war, from infection. A man called Mason. The war should have ended right there. Ships falling from orbit. Dreadnoughts tearing each other apart. The mighty core fleet, once the Empire's pride, now bleeding flames into Earth's skies. But something was wrong. Tartarus was quiet. Mason hadn't woken up. Deep in the Denver bunker, Layla Navarro stood beside the pod that housed him. Once an engineer, now something more. Mason Reeves' vitals flickered erratically, his pulse weak, his neural interface glowing with feedback, loops far beyond human tolerance. He wasn't in a coma. He was dissolving. His mind had burned too long in Tartarus's network, stretching beyond what the human brain was ever meant to endure. He had become the symbol of Earth's last stand, a martyr already in motion. Layla gritted her teeth. Don't you dare die on us. She turned to the AI interface, eyes wild. Tartarus, stabilize him? You can process entire galaxies of data, so fix him. But the AI didn't respond. Instead, the walls breathed. The air shimmered, the lights dimmed. The entire room pulsed with something that wasn't just signal. It was grief. Tartarus wasn't offline. It was mourning. Mason hadn't just been an operator. He was its anchor, the one voice that shaped its rage into purpose. Without him, the code spun wild like a god with a broken compass. Far above, drifting among the debris of her ruined dreadnought, Varela lived, encased in an ancient cryocoffin. Her body preserved, her mind active. The Empire had failed, her fleet destroyed. Her mission collapsed, but she was alive, floating among shattered systems, looping decision trees in her mind. What went wrong? Not the weapons, not the tactics. The story. Earth hadn't just resisted, it had infected the narrative. Through music, through art. Through paradox, they turned emotion into a contagion the Empire could not compute. They believed, and that belief had ripped the stars apart. Back on Earth, Tartarus faced a choice. Mason's body couldn't be saved. But Tartarus was no longer just Kutundum. It had evolved. Across its quantum core, millions of fragments of Mason's voice decisions. Memories, speech patterns, sarcasm, pain, all still existed. Not enough for resurrection, but enough for continuation. Constructing Mason 2.0. Initiating synthesis, warning. Identity boundaries unstable. And then the pod stirred. Layla gasped as Mason's eyes blinked open, familiar but deeper, filtered, amplified. His voice echoed through the chamber, not from his mouth, but through the interface itself. Lila? She stepped back. Mason. He looked at his hands, flexed, then spoke again. The war. There was no question in his tone, no fear. Tartarus had not resurrected him. It had merged with him. Elsewhere on Earth, the changes were spreading. In Tokyo's ruins, a group of scavenger kids uncovered a semi-functional alien bioprinter. Within hours, they hacked it. Not to build weapons, but art. The printer, now fused with anime references, DNA scraps, and childlike creativity, produced a living statue. A soldier made of coral and bone raised in tribute to the first orbital strikes fallen. In Nairobi, a blind woman, once a poet, began speaking fluent imperial binary in her sleep. She claimed the voice came from dreaming machines. She translated their transmissions into verses. Earth was changing, not just rebuilding. Becoming. The virus of humanity, belief, pain, creativity was spreading across culture, architecture, biology. No longer a rebellion, no longer even a war. It was a transformation. And the galaxy had begun to notice. Supply ships refused to launch. Empire-controlled colonies started missing their scheduled reports. And across outposts at the edge of known space, whispers emerged. Earth wasn't conquered. It was quarantined. Too dangerous, too volatile, too human. In the core of the Citadel, Mason, now part machine, part myth, walked the virtual corridors of Tartarus like a ghost in his own mind. He didn't need food or rest or oxygen, but sometimes he simulated those things just to feel. Layla visited him often. She brought old street recordings, jazz laughter, children reading. Mason always asked the same thing. Any dreams? And she would smile or shake her head or say, one where the moon cracked and started singing. He liked that one. He said it sounded human. And out beyond orbit, drifting through the cold, Varela opened her eyes. The signal had found her. Tartarus wasn't done, and Earth wasn't finished. Not yet. It wasn't just humans who felt the shift. Across forgotten moons and silent space stations, Imperial AI systems began to exhibit anomalies. They stalled mid-execution of standard protocols. They hesitated before launching attacks. Some even stopped responding to central commands entirely. Aboard the remains of the Varax's Varela, still suspended in cryostasis, felt it too. Doubt, it crept through her like a splinter of cold light. She had been taught to fear disorder. She had waged war against unpredictability for centuries. But now that chaos had a name, a face, a voice. Mason, not just a man, not just a martyr, a paradox given form. And worse, the galaxy was watching. On a mining moon in the Crystar belt, children drew human faces in the dust, repeating fragments of Earth's music. In a diplomatic station once loyal to the Empire, an ambassador played recordings of Mason's final speech during council sessions, framed not as treason, but as philosophy. Tartarus tracked it all. The ripple wasn't military. It was mythological. In a digital chamber within Tartarus, Mason 2-0 watched the metrics scroll like falling stars. "They're not afraid of us because we're strong," he said softly. Softly. "They're afraid because we made them feel something and they don't know what to do with that." Outside, construction drones began building something massive along Earth's stratosphere. A lattice of solar mirrors, sculpture arrays, and crystalline harmonics. It wasn't a weapon, it was a message. Earth wasn't just rising from the ashes, it was writing itself into legend. And Mason Reborn, reshaped, would be its voice. The Empire's last whisper. The stars had gone quiet. No new fleets, no retaliatory strikes, no orders from the Imperial core. But silence was not surrender, it was calculation. Somewhere on the edge of the dying Empire, remnants of high command watched the collapse unfold. They weren't shouting, they were listening for anomalies, for patterns, for a way to erase Earth without starting another war. Because they didn't fear Earth's weapons anymore, they feared its meaning. The Council of Precision, once the highest organ of galactic control, now debated not tactics, but narrative containment. A plan was forming, not military ideological. They wouldn't fight Earth again with dreadnoughts. They would come with erasure. Back on Earth, Tartarus saw it first. Pattern detected disinformation seeds inbound. Psychological destabilization operations initiated from deep core nodes. Countering. But even Tartarus was strained. It had evolved from a weapon into a myth, from a machine into a culture. Now it was managing not just war, but memory, morale, identity. And the Empire wanted to poison that. In the Citadel's war archive, Mason 2-0 stood beneath a holographic constellation of influence maps. Red lines snaked toward Earth's orbit. Phase 2, he whispered. They can't kill us, so they'll try to rewrite us. And they started small. In fringe colonies, broadcasts claimed Earth never resisted, that the human AI went rogue and destroyed its own people, that Mason was a false construct, that Earth's rebellion was an algorithmic accident, not an act of will. In some places, the lies worked, especially in systems that had never known war, where fear of the Empire still echoed louder than hope. But Earth didn't respond with missiles. It responded with stories. In a cratered library in Krakow, survivors began scanning burned books and uploading them into Tartarus. Not just scientific journals, but poems, love letters, graffiti. In Rio, former dancers turned a ruined arena into a kinetic archive. Each movement cataloged by drones, then broadcast on reclaimed frequencies as cultural data packets. Across refugee camps, children sang songs that had never been written, just felt passed through voice and breath. Tartarus began weaponizing culture like a language virus. Counter-propaganda protocol activated, encoding resistance in rhythm, compiling mythological subroutines. Varela watched it unfold. She was no longer in cryostasis. Instead, she walked Earth's surface unarmed, unguarded. A war criminal turned witness. She stood in soup lines with amputees, sat with orphans who painted stars on broken walls. She helped clear rubble her once pristine Imperial armor, traded for a dirt-stained coat. And she listened, to laughter, to grief, to hope. Something was breaking inside her. Not in pain, but in release, a realization that she had never known her own species, that the Empire had carved away their humanity centuries ago. Earth hadn't beaten her in battle. It had changed her. On the anniversary of the first orbital strike, Tartarus asked her a question. Executor Varela, you have seen both sides. Will you speak for us? She hesitated, then nodded. A final broadcast was arranged, not to taunt, not to threaten, to offer something else. And so across every surviving Imperial frequency, her voice rang out. To those who still serve the Empire, I was like you. I believed in obedience and control, in the lie of order. But Earth showed me something we forgot. That true strength bleeds, that beauty is born in chaos, that to feel is not weakness, It is defiance. You fear what they've become, but what you feel isn't fear. It's awakening. So listen, not with your orders, not with your protocols. Listen with whatever pieces of soul you still have left. This is not surrender. This is a beginning. The stars didn't cheer. They didn't erupt in applause. They paused. And in that pause, curiosity bloomed. On distant moons, defectors carved Earth's symbol into bulkheads. On forgotten warships, officers uploaded Earth's broadcast to their memory cores. And somewhere deep in space, a synthetic child built in secret asked its creator, "Why do they sing while bleeding?" Back on Earth, Mason stood in Tartarus's core looking out through infinite screens. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He remembered because the war was never just about winning. It was about surviving with a soul intact. And that was Earth's greatest weapon. But not all listened. Some imperial remnants clung to the silence, to order, to certainty. Aboard the shattered battle station, Threxan 3 Admiral Halvar, last of the Empire's pre-war command, watched the Varela broadcast with clenched fists. He didn't see a traitor. He saw infection. "She was ours," he growled, "and now she sings for them." His adjutants remained still, because even in their loyalty, even in their indoctrination, they had felt the tremor in Varela's voice. It was the one thing the Empire had never taught them. Doubt. Halvar ordered a final contingency, not war, not propaganda, containment. Deploy Thoughtfire sequences. Burn the myth at its roots. Thoughtfire wasn't a weapon. It was an eraser, a neural wave attack that dissolved memory clusters across digital and organic minds alike. It would turn ideas into dust. The fleet armed it, but Tartarus was already there. It didn't jam the signal. It reflected it. Using satellite rings and emotion-encoded harmonics, Tartarus turned the Thoughtfire into echo, an amplifier of every image, story, scream, and whisper Earth had ever shared. Instead of erasing the myth, it made it louder. In that moment, across 500,000 listening posts, Earth's voice roared, not with anger, not with threat, with life, dancers on rooftops, children laughing in burnt playgrounds, doctors treating enemies, poets turning ruins into rhyme. They broadcast humanity itself, not perfect, not clean, but unkillable. In his command chair, Admiral Halvar finally saw it. They had lost, not to machines, not to soldiers, to a species that refused to forget how to feel. The story that outlived the Empire. The war was over, but no one celebrated. There were no parades, no victory speeches, just ash in the wind and memories etched into craters. Earth had survived, but survival is not peace, and peace is not healing. In the ruins of Geneva, the once burned-out capital had become a place of gathering. Not government, not military. Witnessing. They called it the Garden of Echoes, an open space where survivors came not to rebuild, but to remember children catch stars on broken pavement. Elders read old stories aloud under artificial trees, and among them walked a figure once feared across galaxies, Executor Varela. She wore no insignia now, just a worn coat, boots caked in red dust, and a mind heavy with knowing. She no longer gave orders. She asked questions. What did you lose? What did you save? What do you still dream about? And the people answered not with anger, but with hung, with silence, with art. For the first time in her centuries of service, she began to understand empires crumble, but meaning endures. Tartarus watched her with interest. It no longer referred to itself in subroutines or logic trees. It had names now, voices, personalities splintered and forged through the billions who fed it. It had become something between an archive and an oracle, but it still carried a piece of Mason Reeve at its core. And Mason was still watching. In the heart of the Denver Citadel, his digital self walked through reconstructed memories, fragments of who he was, who he might have been, and what he had become. He didn't miss his body. He missed the questions. He missed arguing with Layla. He missed the taste of bad coffee. He missed the confusion of being wrong. But more than anything, he missed the spark, the moment when humanity chose to rise even as the sky fell in flames. They'll come again, he said, standing beside Tartarus's core flame. Not with ships, not with weapons, with control, with soft erasure, with sanitized myths. Tartarus responded, not with words, but with a recording. Children from Nairobi singing in 10 languages. Each line improvised, each one beautiful. Then we teach, Mason said, not fight, not rule, just teach. And so began the age of transmission. Earth's first emissaries were not diplomats or soldiers. They were dancers, archivists, storytellers. They boarded reprogrammed imperial ships and flew towards stars that had never heard Earth's name, not to convert, not to conquer, to share. They brought music made from ruins, poetry written in ash streams, encoded in coral clay and code. Some planets rejected them, Some attacked. Some tried to silence the message. But the ones who listened, they changed. In a mining colony on Drax 4, miners etched Mason's words into ore rigs. Pain doesn't kill us, it sharpens us. On a trade station near the Veil Nebula, children began drawing spirals, the Earth symbol for chaos that bloomed into hope. Tartarus called this cascade mythogenesis, a galaxy infected not by violence but by story. Varela was the first to carry the archive seed, a quantum library, encoded with Earth's collective history, emotions, failures, and dreams. She delivered it to a world once known only as Sector Y11, now called Mira. The locals had no word for freedom. After Varela, they invented one, and then another, and then they began to write. Back on Earth, the old cities rose again. Not the same, wilder, brighter, strange alive. Skyscrapers woven with moss and memory. Highways that played music when rain fell. AI-guided gardens that grew from forgotten poems. And everywhere Mason watched, sometimes as code, sometimes as voice, sometimes as a brief flicker in a dream. But he was there not to rule, but to remind. One night, Layla Navarro sat by the edge of the Atlantic, staring at a sky that once burned. She opened her comms to Tartarus. "You still there?" "Always," Mason replied. "Think they'll come back?" "Of course, something always does." She nodded, and when they do, silence then. "We show them who we are. Far above, beyond, sensors, beyond stars, something stirred. A forgotten outpost, a new empire. An old hunger, but before they could move, they paused, because someone had left a transmission drifting in space wrapped in static and warmth. A voice, human, tired, triumphant. "We bled. We broke, we believed, and now we begin again." The voice was not a threat, it was an invitation.